I need you to picture this with me for just 1 second. I need you to picture a woman standing at a window on the third floor of a public housing apartment in Cleveland, Ohio, watching summer rain fall on the street below. She is 52 years old. She is wearing a lavender nightgown she has owned for 20 years, the fabric worn soft as a whisper against her arms. On the table behind her sits a photo album with a cracked spine and faded pictures. Gospel music plays so low it is almost just breath. Black-eyed peas are cooking in the kitchen with a ham hock, filling the apartment with the smell of everything she ever did for people who decided she did not matter. The kids from the apartment buildings on the block are still outside in the rain, shouting and running through the heat because children do not stop living just because the sky opens up. The fan spins all day. It is summer in Cleveland, when everything slows down and the air sits heavy on your shoulders like a hand pressing you down. That woman is me. My name is Patricia, and I am telling you this story from the other side of the worst thing that ever happened to me, which is also the best thing that ever happened to me. But first, I need to take you back to the moment I need you to understand. Not this one, the rain, the nightgown, the peaceful kitchen. I need to take you to a Tuesday afternoon in July 9th, 2024, 2:47 in the afternoon. I had just walked through the kitchen of the house I had co-signed for in 1994, the house I had repainted 3 times, the house I had poured 30 years of my life into like water into dry ground. I was carrying Marcus's lunch on a plate because that is what I did. That is what I always did. I set it on the counter, and my daughter-in-law Cheryl looked at me from across that kitchen, just looked at me, flat, unbothered, like she was deciding something she had already decided a long time ago, and she said, "The trash goes outside. Leave." 14 words. I stood there holding the empty tray. My son was in the next room. I heard the television. He did not come. He did not say one single word. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I know some of you listening to me right now know exactly what that silence sounds like. You know what it feels like when the person who is supposed to love you most decides in that one terrible silence that you are not worth defending. If someone in your life needs to hear this story, save it right now. Because what I am about to tell you took me 6 years to live through, and it is going to change how you see everything. Let me take you back even further. Back to the beginning, when none of this had happened yet, and I was just a woman in Cleveland who believed that loving her family was enough to keep her safe. I grew up on the east side of this city. Cleveland is not glamorous, but it is real. It is block after block of apartment buildings, houses with porches, corner churches with their doors propped open on Sunday mornings, kids riding bikes in the street, women calling out of windows. My neighborhood was exactly that kind of place, loud in the summer, stubborn in the winter, full of people who knew your name and your grandmother's name and the name of the man who broke your heart in 1989. I raised Marcus in a neighborhood like that. I wanted him to know what community felt like, what it meant to belong to something bigger than yourself. In 1994, when Marcus was 22 and talking about buying a house with the woman he was going to marry, I co-signed the mortgage. That was not a small thing. That was my credit, my income verification, my signature on a legal document that said I stood behind this purchase with everything I had. I did it because he asked me to, and because I loved him, and because that is what a mother does when she believes in her child. What I did not understand then, what I would not understand for almost 30 years, was that my signature on that document meant something they had never acknowledged. That my name was on that mortgage as a co-borrower. That in the eyes of the law and the bank, I had a legal stake in that house. I kept the paperwork in a box under my bed. I did not know why I kept it. Some instinct told me not to let it go. The photo album on my table, the one with the cracked spine and the pictures that have faded to that soft brown yellow of old things kept in heat. That album goes back to when Marcus was a baby. There are pictures of him in a yellow onesie on my hip. There are pictures of his first birthday, his first day of school, the day he graduated. There are pictures from before Cheryl. When I look at those early pictures now, I can see something I could not see then. I can see a woman who had everything she needed and did not know it. The fan spins. The rain falls on Cleveland. The peas simmer. Something is wrong. Something has been wrong for a long time. And the first crack in what I had convinced myself was a normal life appeared so quietly that I almost walked right past it. Except I didn't. And the moment I stopped walking past, it was the moment everything changed. I want to explain something about how gaslighting works, because if you have never experienced it from the inside, it sounds impossible. You tell someone the story and they say, "Why didn't you just leave? Why didn't you say something?" And the honest answer is that by the time you understand what is happening to you, it has already been happening for so long that it has become the shape of your reality. You cannot see the cage clearly because you have been living inside it and calling it home. It did not start with Cheryl saying something cruel. It started with nothing, with absence, with the slow withdrawal of warmth, the way a room gets cold before you realize the heat has been off for hours. When Marcus and Cheryl married, she said she wanted me close. She said, and I remember the exact tone, sweet and deliberate, standing in my kitchen on a Sunday after church, "Patricia, I don't want Marcus to ever feel like he had to choose between his wife and his mother. You are welcome in our home. You are family." I held on to that. I held on to it for years. I told myself that whatever I was noticing, whatever small chill I was feeling in the air, was my imagination. She had said I was family. She had said I was welcome. I believe deeply that once someone offers you a place, you honor it by not being difficult. You honor it by being grateful. I had been taught that from the time I was a girl in this city. You take what you are given and you make something out of it, and you do not complain because complaining never fed anyone. So when I noticed that conversations at the dinner table stopped when I walked in, I told myself I had misread the timing. When I noticed that the family photographs on the wall had been updated with pictures I had never seen taken, pictures from birthday parties and holiday dinners that I had not been told about, I told myself I must have forgotten. When my grandchildren stopped running to me at the door and started glancing at their mother before they hugged me, I told myself, children change as they grow. I was 46 when the silence started. I felt too old to start over, too tired to fight, too afraid of being a burden somewhere else. That resignation, that bone-deep sense of there is nowhere else for you, that is a weight they put on you deliberately, even when they never say a word. They make you feel like their charity is the last door open to you in the world. And so I stayed, and I gave everything I had. The black-eyed peas on Sunday mornings, I made those for them. Every Sunday after I came home from church choir rehearsal, still in my good clothes, I would change and go straight to the kitchen. I had been singing hymns in the choir at Greater Peace Baptist every Sunday for 11 years. I loved that choir the way some people love breathing. My voice had always been the one thing that felt entirely mine. Standing in that choir loft with Sister Margaret's hand raised and the organ filling the whole room from the floor up through the soles of your feet, that was the only place in my week where I was not invisible, where I was not useful, where I was just a voice among voices. And the voices together meant something larger than any single one of us. I did not understand until I gave it up what I had actually been holding on to. But as the years went on inside that house, I started skipping rehearsals. First one, then two, then I just quietly stepped down. I told myself I was tired. The truth was that Sunday morning had been colonized by the needs of that household. Cheryl wanted breakfast before the children's activities. Marcus needed his shirts ironed. The grandchildren needed someone there. I gave up the 1 hour of the week that was entirely mine, and I told myself it was love. The income that came into that house, my $840 monthly Social Security disability check, every single month for 6 years. That is $60, $480. I deposited it into the household account. I never questioned it. I told myself it was my contribution. I told myself it was fair, that I was taking up space, and this was how I paid for the space. But I want you to understand something about that money. That was not rent. That was not a negotiated arrangement between equals. That was money I handed to people who had already decided I was a burden, and they took it the same way they took my cooking and my childcare and my ironing and my silence, as if it were simply owed to them. The faith that held me through all of it was not complicated. Gospel music playing low in my apartment whenever I was alone. A few scriptures I kept in my head like stones in my pocket. The sense that somewhere in the accounting of things, endurance meant something. I kept singing even after I left the choir, just quietly in my kitchen, just to remind myself I still had a voice. The hobby I had sacrificed, the choir I had loved. I did not understand yet that they had not just taken my time. They had taken the parts of me that knew I was worth something. And the seeds of betrayal were everywhere, hiding in plain sight. I just had not yet let myself see them. Until I started to notice something odd about Marcus's phone. She did not mean for me to hear it. I need to make that absolutely clear, because the fact that it was an accident is what makes it so devastating. If she had wanted to hurt me, I could have told myself it was cruelty in the heat of a moment. But she sent that voice message to the family group chat on a Thursday evening in March 2024, thinking she was sending it to her sister. 43 seconds. She discovered her mistake 4 minutes later and deleted it. But I had already played it twice. I was standing in my kitchen at 9:22 p.m. I remember because I looked at the clock on the microwave and the numbers felt strange. The way numbers look when your mind is trying to anchor itself to something solid while the ground is moving. I had a glass of water in my hand. Gospel music was playing so low it was barely there. The apartment was quiet, except for the fan and the street sounds and the hiss of the refrigerator. I heard my own name said like a punchline. I heard her say, "She actually thinks we want her here. She's useful, that's all. Once Marcus gets the promotion, she's gone." And then I heard my son laugh. Not a complicated laugh, not a nervous laugh. A relaxed, easy, fully agreeable laugh that said he had heard this before. That this was not new territory between them, that my presence in their home had been discussed and categorized and concluded in exactly these terms for God knows how long. I am going to ask you something directly. Have you ever had a moment where reality shifts so completely that you cannot trust what you understood to be true even 1 second before? Because that is what happened to me standing in that kitchen. I had told myself for 6 years that the coldness was my imagination, that the missing invitations were oversights, that the way Cheryl looked at me when I spoke was something I was projecting. 43 seconds of a voice message dissolved 30 years of a story I had been telling myself, and I was left holding a glass of water in a kitchen at 9:22 p.m. with no idea who I had been all this time. I picked up the photo album. The one with the cracked spine and the faded pictures that I kept on my table, the way some people keep a Bible. I sat down and opened it and looked at Marcus's face at 5 years old, at 8 years old, at his graduation, at his wedding day. I looked at his face in every one of those pictures, and I tried to find the person who would laugh at that. I could not find him. That was the collapse, not the screaming kind, the quiet kind, the kind that happens in your chest when the person you have loved most in the world becomes a stranger. There is a picture in that album from a December when Marcus was maybe 7 years old. He is sitting on the floor of our apartment in the house on Eddy Road, both hands wrapped around a mug of hot chocolate I had made him, looking straight into the camera with this expression of absolute contentment. He had just gotten the bicycle he had been asking for since September. I remember the morning I took that photo, the radiator knocking against the wall, the smell of cocoa and toast, the light coming through the window gray and soft because Cleveland in December does not do otherwise. I remember thinking, if I never have anything more than this is enough. This right here, that is the woman I was then. That is the woman who was now sitting in a kitchen at 9:22 p.m. holding a glass of water while her son's voice played in her ears, laughing like her name was the easiest joke in the room. I did not cry that night. I sat in the quiet, and I understood the full architecture of what had been done to me. The exclusion was intentional. The silence was strategic. The warmth had always been conditional. Conditional on me being useful, on me contributing my money and my labor and my time and never asking for anything in return, never being too much, never making noise. I had spent 6 years shrinking myself into acceptable dimensions, and the acceptable dimensions kept getting smaller, and she had been on the phone with her sister laughing about it. The full scope of the betrayal became clear, not like a flood, but like a map unfolding. I could see the whole territory at once. 6 years of dinner conversations that stopped. 6 years of family photos without me. 6 years of birthday parties I heard about afterward. 6 years of my name in their mouths as a joke. The next morning, I did not cook. I want you to understand how significant that was. I had cooked for that household every single morning for 6 years. It was the first thing I did every day, the first service I rendered to people who saw me as a service. My hands shook when I made only my own coffee, but I kept them still, and I did not put a plate on their counter, and I never cooked for them again. The photo album went back on the table, but it felt different now. Where it had been comfort, it was now evidence. I need to tell you about the morning I went to the Cuyahoga County Administration Building, because it matters how that day went before I found what I was looking for. I had spent 3 weeks after that voice message making a decision about what to do. I had looked up financial exploitation resources. I had called 2 numbers that went to voicemail. I had gone to a housing authority office and explained my situation, the co-signed mortgage, the 6 years of income deposited into their account, the way I had been treated, and a man behind a desk had looked at me with the particular kind of professional emptiness that tells you he has already decided you are not his problem and said there was nothing they could do for me. He said it politely. He handed me a pamphlet. The pamphlet was about senior services. I was 52 years old. I stood outside on the sidewalk in April, Cleveland with my pamphlet about senior services, and I thought, so this is what it means when the system fails. You show up at the right building and the right desk, and you explain the truth of your situation, and a man in a good chair decides nothing can be done, and he sends you out with paper. I had been told there was nothing they could do. I had been told this twice now, the first time at the housing authority, the second time that morning. You know what I want to say right now? I want to say to anyone listening who has ever been turned away from a desk, sent home with a pamphlet, told politely that your problem is not a problem they can solve. You are not crazy. You are not exaggerating. The system was not built with you in mind, and that is the truth, and the truth does not fix the problem, but it matters that you know it. Because when you know the system failed you, you stop trying to make yourself small enough for the system to care about. You start thinking about what you can build yourself. Outside the administration building, there was a folding table. A legal aid clinic had set up that table once a month, the second Wednesday of every month, and I had happened to come on that Wednesday. The woman behind the table was named Doretha. She was maybe 60, with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and a cardigan in the middle of April because Cleveland does not care what month it will still be cold enough to need a sweater. She looked at me when I walked past and she said, "You look like someone just told you there's nothing they can do for you." I stopped. I said, "How did you know?" She said, "Because that's the look every woman has when she walks out of that building." I sat down at her folding table and I told her everything, and Doretha did something that no one at any desk had done. She listened. She did not reach for a pamphlet. She asked me a question. Did I still have the original mortgage paperwork? I told her I had a box under my bed. She said, "That box under your bed might be the most important thing you own. When the system won't act, you document everything and you build your own case." She gave me a card. She told me to call her. She told me what a legal aid attorney could do, and what my rights were as a co-borrower, and what financial exploitation of an elder family member looked like in the state of Ohio. Before I left that folding table, Doretha looked at me over the top of her reading glasses and said something I have thought about almost every day since. She said, "Patricia, the most dangerous thing they did to you was make you believe that box under your bed was nothing. They needed you to believe that. The moment you open it, their whole story falls apart." I nodded like I understood, but I did not fully understand yet. I was still in that in-between place where you can hear the truth, but you have not yet let it all the way in. I thanked her, and I put the card in my purse, and I walked back down the street toward the bus stop. And somewhere between the administration building and the corner, something shifted in me. Some weight that I had been redistributing for 6 years, pretending it was manageable, pretending it was normal, finally sat down in one place where I could see it clearly. And it was enormous, and it was real. And it was not mine to carry anymore. I was not too old. I was not powerless. I was a woman who had been holding the deed the whole time without knowing it. I went home, and I started recording. What you have to understand about those 9 weeks is that I became 2 people. On the outside, I was still Patricia, quiet, manageable, present in the way they needed me to be present. Cooking for myself now, but not making a scene about it. Sitting in my apartment in the evenings with my gospel music and my fan and my photo album. Not visibly different, not obviously changed. On the inside, I was building a case. I had 17 recordings over 9 weeks. I want to be precise about that because precision matters in what I am telling you. I did not record randomly. I recorded deliberately when I heard something I knew I would need, a conversation in the hallway about my usefulness. Cheryl telling her friend on a phone call that I was basically a live-in housekeeper we don't pay. A conversation between Marcus and Cheryl about the promotion, about what would change when it came through, about how they would handle the situation. Handle the situation meant me. I was the situation. I had also pulled out the box from under my bed. The mortgage paperwork from 1994 was there, slightly yellowed, beautifully intact. My name as co-borrower, my income verification from that year, the original loan amount. 30 years of legal standing that no one had ever thought I would use because no one had ever imagined I would know to use it. I spread the papers out on my kitchen table one evening and sat with them under the lamp for a long time. The document was 3 pages, double-sided, with terms I did not fully understand, and a signature at the bottom that was unambiguously mine, the same looping P I had used to sign my name since I was in the 7th grade. I had signed this in 1994 at a table in a bank office on Euclid Avenue, wearing a dress I had pressed that morning because I wanted to look like someone who deserved to be taken seriously. I had signed it because Marcus had asked me to, and because I trusted him, and because I was a mother, and that was what mothers did. I had signed it, and then I had gone home, and I had kept it for 30 years without knowing why. And now I knew why. Some part of me, way down below the words I was able to say, had always known that one day I might need to show someone exactly who I was in the architecture of this thing. Exactly how much I had contributed. Exactly whose name was on the deed. Doretha connected me with a legal aid attorney named Mr. Vance. He was a small man with a very large desk and the kind of calm that only comes from knowing exactly what you are doing. He looked at my paperwork, and he looked at my recordings, and he said, "Mrs. Patricia, we have a case here." He explained what financial exploitation looked like under Ohio law. He explained what co-borrower rights meant for the mortgage. He explained what we could file and where we could file it, and what the realistic outcomes were. I want to tell you about the day I threw out the chair, because that was the moment I knew I was free, even before I was. Marcus had this armchair that he kept in my living room. It was enormous. It was ugly. It was one of those chairs that takes up so much space it rearranges the entire room around it. And it had been sitting in my living room for 3 years because Cheryl had redecorated, and there was no room for it in the main house, and Marcus had said, "Just keep it in your place for now." And I had said yes, because I always said yes. No one ever sat in it except Marcus on holidays, briefly. And then he would leave, and the chair would sit there for another 11 months, taking up a third of my living room. On a Saturday in early June, I pushed that chair out my apartment door, down the hall, to the elevator, down to the lobby, and out to the curb. By myself. It was heavy. I had to rest twice. But I got it to the curb, and I stood on the sidewalk outside my building, and I looked at it sitting there, and I felt something move through my chest, like warm air through an open window. I went back upstairs. I rearranged my living room. I could see the whole room clearly for the first time in 3 years. I put a small table where the chair had been and set my photo album on it next to a lamp. Doretha called to check on me the next week. I told her the attorney had everything he needed. She said, "Are you scared?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Good. That means it's real." I had found, in a stranger at a folding table, the one thing I had not had in 6 years. Someone who saw me clearly and was entirely on my side. The trap was set. The only question was where and when to close it. Mr. Vance handled the logistics of the confrontation with a professionalism I genuinely admired. He told me we had several options for when to file the civil action, and that the filing itself could be served at any time we chose. He said the timing was up to me. Some clients prefer to do it quietly, in private, with minimal witnesses. He said this in a tone that made clear he was also offering me the other option without having to say it directly. I told him I wanted to be present when it was served. I told him I wanted there to be people there. He said, "All right." I knew about the promotion ceremony because I had overheard the planning for weeks. Marcus had made regional director at his firm. It was a significant thing, a real thing, a decade of work arriving at a moment. I understood that. I want to be honest about that because I am not a person who takes pleasure in destroying someone's joy out of nothing. But I had watched my own joy be destroyed quietly over years in a house I helped build with money I gave from my own account. And Cheryl had said, once Marcus gets the promotion, she's gone. The promotion was the expiration date they had set for me. I decided it was also going to be the moment I exercised every right I had earned. The firm had rented a private room at a downtown Cleveland restaurant. A good one. The kind of place with cloth napkins and low lighting and waiters who refill your water without being asked. I had never eaten there, but I knew the street. Marcus had mentioned the restaurant name in a phone call I had recorded. 52 colleagues and family members would be present. Cheryl had spent 2 weeks planning what she was going to wear, a conversation I had also recorded. In the week before the ceremony, I watched from my window as Marcus drove the family's ocean blue Porsche Cayenne out of the building's small lot. He had bought it 4 months earlier. It was beautiful, I will say that deep blue catching the evening light like it meant something. I thought about that car. I thought about 60, 480. I thought about 30 years of maintenance and co-signing and cooking and singing in the choir until I had given away the only hour of the week that was mine. I had my own dress. I had my own attorney. I had a folder containing documents that told a story no one in that room was going to be prepared to hear. The night before, I sat in my living room with the fan running and gospel music playing low, and I opened my photo album for the first time in weeks. I looked at every photograph. I did not feel angry. I did not feel sad, not exactly. I felt something closer to ready. The photo album with the cracked spine and the faded pictures had been showing me something the whole time, not a record of love that had curdled, but a record of a woman who had built something real. The question was what she was going to do with it now. I closed the album and set it on the table beside the lamp, and I went to bed. The restaurant was on a street in downtown Cleveland where the old buildings press close together and the light from the windows falls warm and gold on the sidewalk at night. I remember the sound of my own shoes on the pavement. I remember the temperature had dropped just enough that the summer air felt like permission. I remember thinking, this is the last time anyone will ever look at me and see the woman they thought I was. Mr. Vance met me at the door at 7:15 p.m. He was already there when I arrived, standing near the entrance in a gray suit, holding a leather case with a composure so complete it was almost architectural. He said, "Are you ready?" I said, "I have been ready for 6 years without knowing it." We went in. I want to describe this room to you because I want you to understand what it felt like to walk into it. Long table down the center, white tablecloths, candles, 52 people who had been eating and laughing and toasting Marcus's success. Cheryl was at the near end of the table in a dress she had been planning for 2 weeks, talking to a woman I did not recognize. Marcus was at the far end, surrounded by colleagues, looking the way a person looks when everything is going exactly right. He saw me first. His face changed the way weather changes, too fast, wrong direction. Then Cheryl saw me. The color left her face, not metaphorically, literally. I watched it happen from across the room, and I felt nothing except a profound, almost clinical clarity. I did not rush. I walked to the center of the room where the table widened and the candles were brightest and the sight lines were longest, and Mr. Vance approached Marcus's position at the table and served the civil filing. The room went quiet the way rooms go quiet when something is happening that no one has a category for. Marcus stood up. He said, "Mom, what is this?" Not angry, genuinely confused, which told me everything I needed to know about how thoroughly he had convinced himself I would never do anything. I looked at him across that table and I said, "It is 30 years of a name on a mortgage you forgot was there. It is $60,000 of my money you spent deciding when to throw me out. It is everything I gave you that you never once called a gift." Cheryl said, "You can't do this here." I said, "I am already doing it here." She said, "After everything we did for you." And I said the thing I had been carrying in my chest without knowing how to say it. "You did not do anything for me. You used me, and then you called me the trash. And the only mistake you made is that you forgot I am also the deed." The room had 52 people in it, and none of them made a sound. Marcus's supervisor, a tall man named Dr. Gerald, who I had never met, and who had clearly not expected his celebration dinner to include a civil filing and a woman quoting property law, asked what was happening. Marcus opened his mouth and closed it. He had no answer. For the first time in 6 years, the silence in a room was not mine to carry. It was his. The recordings played in court 3 weeks later. I sat in a chair in the Cuyahoga County Courthouse and listened to my son's voice on a speaker laugh at my name, and I looked at the judge, and I did not look away. The courtroom was smaller than I had expected. Plain walls, fluorescent light, the smell of recycled air and old paper. Marcus sat at the other table in a gray suit looking at his hands. Cheryl was beside him. She had worn pearl earrings. I noticed the pearl earrings and I thought, she dressed up for this the same way I dressed up for that bank in 1994. We both understood, in our own ways, that some rooms require you to perform seriousness. The judge listened. Mr. Vance spoke. The recordings played, all 43 seconds of the voice message, and 3 others I had captured over those 9 weeks. Each one sitting in the air of that room like something that could not be taken back, because it couldn't. The judge ruled. The gavel came down, and I was owed everything. Justice, when it finally arrives, does not always feel the way you imagined it would. I expected relief. I expected something like triumph, like the sound of a crowd after a long game. What I actually felt was quieter than that. It was more like the feeling of setting down a bag you have been carrying so long you had forgotten it was heavy until you put it on the ground and your shoulders rose half an inch. The civil judgment was $60, $480. Every dollar I had deposited into their household account for 6 years, ruled as financially exploitative under Ohio elder law with me, at 52, qualifying under the statute's provisions for a dependent adult in a care arrangement. Full restitution, payment structured in installments. The first installment came in 8 weeks. But the judgment was not the only consequence. Cheryl had held a position on the board of a local nonprofit, a housing advocacy organization, which carries a particular irony I will leave you to sit with, for 4 years. When the recordings from the civil case became part of the public filing, The board received a copy. She was asked to resign. She resigned. The mortgage required a legal resolution that took the better part of 4 months and cost them significantly in legal fees and interest calculations. Their credit took the damage that 30 years of co-borrower financial history, now contested and litigated, does to a credit score. And Marcus's colleagues at the firm, all 52 of them, plus whoever they told, knew what kind of man had stood in that room with no answer. I did not go back to that house. I never went back. I used the first installment as a deposit on a house near my sister on the west side of Cleveland, in a quiet neighborhood where the streets are lined with old trees that go gold in October, and the porches face west so you get the long evening light. My sister's name is Rosetta, and she has a garden in her backyard, and she makes sweet potato pie from scratch, and she laughed when I told her the whole story. Not at the pain of it, but at the ending. The kind of laughter that is also relief, that says, I always knew you were stronger than you believed. The first thing I brought to my new house was the photo album. I set it on the shelf in my living room by the window that faces the street. And here is what I want to tell you about that photo album now, the one with the cracked spine and the faded pictures. It is not a wound anymore. It is a record. It is evidence of a woman who did not quit, who kept cooking and singing and enduring long enough to build the case that freed her. Those faded pictures of Marcus as a child are still in there. That is complicated and real, and I do not pretend it isn't. But I am the one who decides now what those pictures mean. Not him, not her, me. Doretha came to my moving day. She showed up with a plant from my kitchen windowsill and helped me unpack 3 boxes of dishes. She did not make a speech. She just worked alongside me the way a person does when they have decided you are worth showing up for. I think about what would have happened if she had not been sitting at that folding table on that specific Wednesday. I think about it, and I feel a deep gratitude not just to her, but to every person who decides to put a folding table outside a government building and give someone like me a different door to walk through. I am back in the choir at Greater Peace Baptist. I have been back for 4 months. The director, Sister Margaret, said when I walked in, "Patricia, your voice has been missed." I had to stand very still for a moment after she said that because I had not known until she said it out loud how much I had needed to hear that something of mine had been missed. That I had been missed. I sang the first Sunday back, and my voice cracked on the 3rd verse of the opening hymn, and I kept singing anyway, and no one looked at me like I had done anything wrong. Someday, I am going to treat myself to that Porsche Cayenne in ocean blue. I have thought about it more than once. I think about pulling up to my sister's house in that car and Rosetta coming out on the porch with her hand over her mouth. I think about the color of it in the evening light, the fortune I lost and reclaimed, the wealth I built in silence and in sacrifice. Maybe some of it should go to something beautiful. Maybe I have earned a beautiful thing, but right now I have a porch that faces west, and an evening that is mine. Chapter 9. What the rain was trying to tell me. Time passed, the way it does after something large. The summer that began with a voice message on a Thursday evening in March dissolved into fall, and then into a Cleveland winter that was exactly as unrelenting as every Cleveland winter before it, gray and low-slung and cold enough to make you feel like the sky is sitting on your shoulders. And then spring came, the way it always does, with no fanfare. Just a morning when the air was different and the kids on my new block were outside again, and my sister's garden had that particular smell of turned dirt and possibility. I am sitting on my porch right now as I tell you this story. The porch that faces west, the one I chose. Rosetta is inside making coffee, and I can hear the radio from her kitchen window playing something slow and good. The old trees on this street are fully leafed out in the kind of green that Cleveland only gets in early summer. That specific green that is almost aggressive, that says we made it through again. I have a glass of sweet tea. The gospel music is not playing low today. Today I have the window open, and Sister Martin's voice is coming out at full volume, and I am not apologizing for it. I want to spend this last part of our time together talking to you honestly about what I learned. Not the legal strategy, though we will talk about that. Something underneath that. Something about how this happens and why it keeps happening and what you do when the systems that are supposed to catch you decide they have other priorities. When Cheryl called me the trash and told me to leave, she was the end point of a process that had been running for years. That process has a name. It is called elder financial exploitation when it involves money. It is called emotional abuse when it involves the silence and the exclusion and the erasure. It is called coercive control when it involves the isolation, the manipulation of dependence, the systematic dismantling of a person's sense of their own worth. I did not have these words in the years I was living it. I want you to have them now. I went to the housing authority and I was turned away. I went to the county office and I was turned away. 2 desks, 2 pamphlets, 2 polite dismissals. And I want to be honest with you about how close I came to accepting that as the final answer. Because when the official systems tell you your problem is not their problem, there is a part of you that wonders if they are right. If maybe you have misread something. If maybe you are being dramatic about what was just a difficult living situation with a family that could have communicated better. That part of you is lying, and the lie is reinforced by every desk that turns you away. What I want you to know is this: when the system fails you, and it will fail some of you, and it has already failed some of you listening to me right now, you build your own case. You find the Doretha at the folding table. You contact your local legal aid clinic. You look up your state's elder law provisions. You look up your name on documents you signed 20 or 30 years ago and assumed no longer mattered. You document. You record what is legal to record in your state. You keep every paper in a box under your bed, and you do not rush. The timing of the confrontation is your power. They do not get to choose when the truth arrives. Studies confirm that 65% of all abuse cases involve female victims. We are taught from the time we are small girls to endure quietly. We are taught to call that endurance strength. We are taught that keeping the peace is the same as keeping ourselves, when in fact they are often exact opposites. The peace I kept in that house for 6 years cost me $60,000. My voice in a choir I loved, my sense of my own reality, and 30 years of accumulated rights in a mortgage I had co-signed in good faith. I paid for that peace with everything I had. I think about the women in my community who are navigating housing insecurity, who are in situations where they depend on family arrangements that have turned exploitative, who have nowhere obvious to go. We know that across vulnerable populations, and displacement data shows us that Puerto Ricans are 5% and Cubans 9% of Latino seniors in housing insecurity situations. Across all demographics, the pattern is consistent. The women who are described as burdens are often the ones who signed the documents, who contributed the income, who did the invisible labor that kept the entire arrangement functional. They are holding the deed. They just need someone to tell them to look. I want to be that voice for you today. Look. Look at what you signed. Look at what you contributed. Look at what you gave and what you were given in return. Look at the box under your bed. Look at the folding table outside the building where someone just turned you away, and see if there is a Doretha sitting there with her reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, waiting to change your life. My story did not end when she said those 14 words to me in that kitchen. It started there. Every story of liberation begins at the point of maximum insult. At the moment when someone decides you have reached your expiration date and looks at you with flat eyes and tells you so. That is not an ending. That is a beginning. That is the exact moment you pick up the box from under the bed and open it. The photo album is on my shelf. My sister is inside making coffee. The trees on this street are that violent summer green. The fan spins, the radio plays. I am 52 years old, and I am exactly where I was always supposed to be. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you listening to me from right now? Drop your city in the comments and tell me you are there. I want to know where this story is reaching, and I want you to tell me, what would you have done? When she sent that voice message by accident, when I heard my name spoken like a joke in my own kitchen, what would you have done with 43 seconds of truth? Tell me in the comments. I want to know. If this story moved something in you, if you recognized yourself anywhere in it, if you thought of someone you love who needs to hear this, give this video a like and share it with that person today. And if you are not subscribed yet, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, because every week I come back with another story of women who refused to be erased, women who found the deed, women who showed up at the ceremony. I will be here, and so will you.